So let's talk about the brand new Google Pixel 4a because boy, do I really have a lot to talk about when it comes to the Google Pixel 4a. For starters, I really do think that the Google Pixel 4a is the best mid-ranged phone money can buy without a doubt. And that's actually saying a lot, taking in consideration how many other mid-range phones have came out this year. Some of the big hard hitters, of course, definitely have to be the OnePlus Nord and the iPhone SE, just to name a couple of phones that have came out this year, which are, of course, mid-ranged phones. And I still wholeheartedly say this. I still think the Google Pixel 4a is the best budget phone money can buy for a couple of different reasons. One is you are getting a really good phone for the price. It is $350, and that is undercutting the competition when we look at other mid-range phones. And you know this was no coincidence. You know Google was looking specifically at Apple and was like, yeah, your iPhone SE is $400, so we will undercut you by $50. It's going to appeal to a lot more people who want to save $50 and who really need a really solid phone at the mid-range price for $350. Other than that, a lot of people may have bought the iPhone SE at $400, but then when they see the price of the Google Pixel 4a, they'll be like, well, I am saving $50, and $50 is still $50, so I'm going to go ahead and buy the Google Pixel 4a. Another reason why the Google Pixel 4a is a killer mid-ranged phone is the fact that the camera on this thing is flat out fantastic for a mid-ranged phone. It may even beat some higher tier phones when we're actually talking about smartphone cameras as a whole, because you look at what Google is doing with their camera tech. They make some of the best cameras in smartphone technology, period. Sure, maybe the Google Pixel 4 didn't really compare to what Google did with, for instance, the Google Pixel 3. That one was a mind-blowing phone, especially for the camera. And then the Google Pixel 4 came out, and it was like, well, it's still a great camera, but it's not blowing our socks off like it did with the Google Pixel 3. But compared to the competition, it is an amazing camera, and that's why you would go for that device. Don't think, oh, it's $350, so a lot of it's going to be subpar to the competition. No, specifically the camera in that thing is amazing. Alongside the camera that they put in there and alongside the actual software engineering inside the phone that really utilize the camera, they do make some of the best cameras on smartphones today, and that's why you would actually buy this thing. Sure, this phone is not a perfect phone. There is a lot of downsides to this phone. Let's talk about that. Some of the downsides to this phone, of course, are going to be the build quality of this thing. This thing is an all plastic build. On one hand, of course, that means it might not stand up all too well to maybe bending and things like that. But on another hand, at least, if you drop this thing, in theory, the back shouldn't shatter, and it should be a much more easier device when you have to throw this thing around. I know a lot of people aren't really happy with plastic builds on devices or technology, just because when you hold these things in the hand, you don't really get that premium feel like you would with another smartphone using different materials. But you have to keep in mind, this thing is only $350, so I know where the sacrifice had to be made. It definitely had to be made in the build of this thing. But I think for most people who are buying this thing at $350, I think most of the downsides to this phone are going to be tossed aside, just because you're purposely looking for a smartphone that you can just use every day to do everyday tasks, like maybe call people, text people, browse the internet, maybe take some pictures, do some light stuff on your phone. You just need a phone that's going to work, and the Google Pixel 4 is going to work. Unfortunately, it's not going to work well, to be honest, just because they are using a mid-range chip. They're not using anything too crazy in the 4a, and that's where the biggest problem with the 4a lies, the performance of it. Just like last year's 3a, a lot of people were complaining that the performance wasn't that good. Some apps would take longer than usual to actually open when it actually comes to the Google Pixel 3a, and the 4a is pretty much no different. It is kind of a sluggish phone, but that has to do with the fact that they are using a mid-ranged chip in it. It's not bad, but if you wanted to do anything that's kind of intensive on the phone, unfortunately, this phone may not be for you, and you may actually want to look at Apple's iPhone SE, because where Google skimped on the processor, Apple didn't skimp on the processor on their mid-range phone, the iPhone SE. You're still rocking the same exact chip that you would be getting on their premium smartphone line, the iPhone 11's line. You would still be getting that A13 Bionics chip, whereas on the Google Pixel, they're not using the same processors they're using on other top-end Android smartphones. They're actually using a mid-range chip. I think the chip specifically that they are using on this phone is actually, let's see here, I want to say it's Snapdragon 730 chip, and that's not the best one on the market, unfortunately. It doesn't perform all that well, but it doesn't perform bad either. It's not like it's a bad chip. It's just that stuff will just take longer to actually perform on this phone compared to other phones out there on the market. And that, I guess, is one of the biggest downsides to this phone. If you want to play games or if you want to do hard tasks on your phone, unfortunately this is not going to be the phone for you. But like I said, again, most people, I really do think, who are buying this phone aren't even thinking to do anything crazy with their phone. They just want a phone that works to do like web browsing, to take pictures, to call people, just a solid, reliable phone for as little as possible. And I think this is where the value actually comes from this phone. I think most people who buy this phone won't even care about all the downsides this phone has to offer, just because you do have to remember this thing is super cheap for a smartphone. And the nice thing with this is you are going to be getting updates for many years, just because this is a Google branded phone. And of course, if you do get any Google branded phone, any of the Pixel line, that means you do get software updates immediately right when they're released from Google. So that's kind of cool. Of course, you do have stock Android as well, and there's always been a big debate in the tech industry when it comes to software. Watch your preference when it comes to Android specifically. Do you like a skin on top of Android like Samsung's One UI, or do you like Oxygen OS from, like, for instance, OnePlus? Do you like all these different skins on your Android device? I personally flip-flop back and forth. Sometimes I think it's cool to have no skin on Android, because sometimes I feel like having a skin on Android does bog down the phone and does make it a little bit more like not as clean as I would like it. But then on another hand, sometimes it is nice to have all these extra features you wouldn't get with the stock Android operating system if it didn't have a skin on it. And sometimes I feel like you get a little bit more for your money if you do have a skin on top of Android. So that's something that can be a heated debate in the tech industry. And here's some other specs for you for this phone. Like, for instance, again, I said this is running the Snapdragon 730 processor, which is, of course, an okay chip, nothing too mind-blowing there. And then we do have 6 gigs of RAM, so you can see they did not skimp on RAM here. So even though you are using a mid-range chip from Snapdragon, you still got crazy RAM in here, which is kind of interesting. For the camera, you are using a 12 megapixel camera, which I think will record in 4K. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that 12 megapixel camera is actually a pretty amazing camera for what it is. Again, Google really knows how to adapt their software and their hardware when it comes to taking pictures, and everybody who uses this phone won't be disappointed with the camera that's going to be pumping out of this thing. You'll be taking some crazy pictures with this thing, and most people will be happy with the pictures on here. I think the resolution of the actual display on here is only correct me if I'm wrong, 1080p, but that is okay because you still are getting a very solid, nice display with this thing. You are going to be getting a 443 ppi screen, so the density of the pixels will be very clear, and for everyone using this, it won't be a big deal. Apparently, from all I'm reading here, is it does state that this phone does have an OLED screen, but I'm not sure if this has an OLED screen for $350. That may be incorrect. If it is correct, I would actually be pretty surprised at the price point. So I'm not sure if that is actually correct, if this thing has an OLED screen or not. But for the price, I just don't see that being a thing. But again, it could be possible. But again, take that for a grain of salt because I'm not too sure about that. The screen size of this thing is 5.81 inches, so I think roughly 5.2 inches. I think this is, as far as I remember, a one-handed device for the most part. It is a very small phone. It looks like also you are not getting any micro SD card slot for the price. You are getting 128 gigs built on storage right out the gate, and for most people that is probably going to be enough storage. Again, all the downsides to this phone doesn't matter at all, because these phones specifically are targeting a different demographic. They are targeting people who really don't care about technology, and all they want is a good solid phone to actually buy. And this one, for the money, over any other mid-range phone, can be highly recommended, just because of all the things I just said, and mainly because the price point of this thing is $350. Now that I see more mid-range phones in 2020, it really makes me ask the question, is there any point to having these crazy flagship killers that usually cost around $1,000 or $1,000? Honestly, it's starting to seem like a lot of those phones don't even matter now. Sure, you do get some nice benefits with having those phones, like for instance, the build quality is better. They do have an IP rating, so they are going to be more durable at the end of the day. They also have bigger batteries at the end of the day. Usually the screens are better. There's a lot of things that are better with those flagship killers, but just the fact that all these mid-range phones come out and they do almost everything that a flagship phone could actually do, it's kind of like, why would you even buy a flagship phone? Even if you are a technology nerd like myself, why would I buy those? Because what do we do on our smartphones? Most of us do the exact same tasks. We're browsing the internet, we're taking pictures, we're just doing everything that you could do on a flagship phone on a mid-range phone. Is kind of like, why do those even exist? But I understand why those exist, because some people want more for their money, and I can't really disagree and say those phones aren't better, because clearly they are better, and they are for a different demographic who wants a phone that's going to be much more premium, have more features, have more bells and whistles and things like that. But I think for most people out there, again, even technology enthusiasts like myself, there really is no point of buying a phone that's upwards of $1,000 when you would be doing the same tasks on that phone you'd be getting on a mid-range phone. So it's kind of like, why even buy those at the end of the day? But I still see their prevalence, and I still see their relevance in the tech industry, and I see why those phones have to exist as well, because we do want to see the bleeding edge of technology. And when we see mid-range phones, if everyone bought a mid-range phone, to be honest, then it wouldn't really push the envelope of what technology could be, because all these companies are trying to make these phones that are mid-range phones. They're trying to sacrifice a little bit in a lot of different departments, and that's something I don't want to see. I want to actually see companies push the bleeding edge of technology. Sure, the bleeding edge of technology is going to be an expensive place to be, but I would like to be at the bleeding edge of technology just to see what technology could evolve in, and it does support the creation of these companies making crazy phones in the near future, of course, and that's something I want to see out of it. And the nice thing also, before I quit talking about the Google Pixel 4a, I guess the nice thing about the Google Pixel 4a is it has a pretty solid battery on it. I think it's a let me see here. I want to say 3200 milliamp as far as I remember. Yes, about a 3200 milliamp battery. More specifically, a 3100 milliamp battery. But for a lot of people, they said for this type of display and for the chip inside of here, it really doesn't drain battery. And that's something you can't actually say about the iPhone SE, because the iPhone SE is using a top quality chip from Apple, the one inside the iPhone 11. That would be all fine and dandy, and that would be awesome. But the problem is, with that phone, they did skimp on the actual battery inside. It is a pretty low capacity for that type of chip that does pull a lot of juice on the battery, and unfortunately that one doesn't get good battery at all. That's the biggest downside with the chip inside. So if you do value long-lasting battery, and you're not going to be doing anything too graphically intensive or anything too hardcore with your phone, then this one is definitely better than that one in that aspect as well. Overall, I think my final thoughts with the Google Pixel 4a is it's an amazing phone for what it is. You buy that for $350, you need a solid phone. You won't be disappointed with this. Again, I've said it many times. I think everyone who's buying this phone doesn't even care about all the downsides to this phone. Overall, this is a really nice package from Google, and it's an amazing phone. And time again, ever since they started doing a budget phone with the 3A, I really think this is a keeper in the Google smartphone space. It's kind of funny that it really does seem like from year to year, ever since last year, Google is better at making mid-range phones compared to their high-end Android smartphones, because a lot of times Google does make their, of course, their Google Pixel line. It is targeted towards the higher end market. And when you look at the higher end market, most people aren't even buying the Google Pixel line. Most people are either buying Samsung, or they're buying Apple, of course, or they're buying LG or somebody else. They're not really buying the Google Pixel line. So it's kind of funny is, why are they even making high-end Android smartphones when they should be focusing on the mid-range smartphones? Because that's where I really do think Google really does excel when it actually comes to their smartphone brand. They're really better off making these mid-range smartphones for the mid-range crowd, and they do extremely well. And these things do sell extremely well in the mid-range smartphone realm, because there is really nothing in the mid-range smartphone realm for the price and for what you're getting that can actually beat these phones, and these are killer deals. So yeah, go ahead and pick one of these up if you're thinking about buying a phone, or if you just wanted to play around with one for fun. This one is a no-brainer at $350. It's kind of like, you might as well buy it. You'll love it. You'll keep it. It's an amazing phone, and things like that. Now, the next one on my list is actually going to be about more of the Xbox, because it looks like Microsoft still wants to make Xbox Live, or their online multiplayer aspect of the Xbox free as we speak. Now, there is no it is not confirmed at this point that Microsoft is actually going to be making their Xbox Live free, so you don't have to pay for the multiplayer side of gaming. Honestly, I really do hope this is real, not because I'm a cheap person or anything like that, just due to the fact that it would be the first time, I think, in history that if Microsoft does this, I think it would be a kind of different take on their brand. It would also be a different take on multiplayer on consoles, because it is funny, a lot of companies used to have free-to-play multiplayer on their consoles. We go back to the original Wii. Granted, the Wii didn't have good online multiplayer. It was garbage for the most part. You didn't have things like a voice chat. You didn't have a friends list. A lot of things weren't good with the multiplayer aspect of the Wii, but you did have multiplayer in certain games. Same thing with the PS3. The PS3 was one of the first other consoles to have free-to-play multiplayer right out of the gate. You didn't have to pay for their online subscription. And then as the years moved on, more people realized, yeah, we have to copy Microsoft. Microsoft knows what they're doing. That's a little bit more cash in our pocket. We know gamers are going to be willing to pay it up. They already have the box. A lot of these gamers are used to paying for Xbox Live, so why not just make our subscription services free? And paid, excuse me. Now looking in 2020, most of these services are going to be a paid services, whether we're talking about Nintendo's online, whether we're talking about Sony's PSN, or of course Xbox Live. Of course, you do have to pay for online multiplayer. The only place you don't have to pay for online multiplayer, of course, is actually going to be the PC, and it's pretty much been like that ever since the existence of online multiplayer with PC gaming. That's pretty much how it's been. So maybe Microsoft's trying to do something different to get people more interested in their online service and their brand as well, because as we speak, if you look at game sales as a whole, and you look at companies, Microsoft is not leading the pack when it comes to video game and consoles. It's actually Sony currently as we speak with the PS4. The PS4 has been selling extremely well, and Microsoft is still last place, even when you compare them to something like Nintendo, which I know a lot of people out there don't like comparing Nintendo and the other consoles on the market, just because they're so different as a company, and their vision of gaming has always been slightly different. At least ever since the Wii, they've been taking on a different direction with gaming, of course, but it's still a fair comparison, because let's face it, they both make games and they both have a console that plays games, so it is a fair assumption and it is a fair thing, I do believe. But yeah, this would actually be a very big step for Microsoft if they actually did this, just because I keep looking at it and thinking about it. I think this is a good idea, just because, well, all the other brands out there, again, do have to have paid online multiplayer like Sony and like Nintendo now. And then, of course, the PC Master Race doesn't have it. So maybe they're trying to get more people a reason to actually jump on board with the Xbox brand. And this might be one way for people to jump on the Xbox bandwagon if they actually do something like this. Now, we don't know how they're going to actually do this. Would they just make Xbox Live free to where you play all the games online free? But then a lot of people keep saying, I said this yesterday in my other podcast episode, they would just make some of the features like a paid features, like for instance, if you wanted the friends list or if you wanted voice chat, messaging, they would charge you for that, but then they wouldn't charge you for things like just playing with random people online. With your games, for instance, because of course this all ties into the fact that they do have Xbox Games Pass now, and some people out there keep saying that they're just going to bundle everything with Games Pass. You'll still pay for Xbox Live, and you'll still have to pay for multiplayer. However, it'll just be part of your regular subscription with the base Xbox Games Pass. So if Xbox Games Pass is $10, then you'll get Xbox Live free, and honestly, I think that's a good way to go about it because it's a win-win scenario for gamers, because some people may be saying, wait a second, isn't Xbox Live still technically, are the online multiplayer still technically a paid service if you put it with Xbox Games Pass even for $10 a month? Yeah, that is true, but you are going to be forced to buy Games Pass at that rate, so you might as well just say, well, I'm getting a lot for my money because now I can play those games online, but now I have a whole selection of games I can play at the click of my fingertips, and that makes sense just because games are expensive and a lot of people don't want to buy games for $60 a pop, because if you were to buy every hot new release for $60 a pop, at least here in the US, this could get very expensive very fast, especially since there are rumors next generation that games may even be higher than $60. They may even be like $60 to like $70 depending on what game it is, and that's not good news. So if they just force everyone to buy Games Pass and Xbox Live is included with Games Pass, I think that's the best way to honestly go about it, and I would be happy if they did that. Or actually, it would actually kind of be better now that I think about it to just bundle it or just make it a free service at all and then charge for the premium stuff if you don't need the premium stuff, because I can see a lot of people not caring about the premium stuff. They don't care about like talking to their friends, messaging people. All they want to play is an online session of like Madden or like NBA 2K with a random stranger online, and that might be a reason for people to go out and buy an Xbox if they made their online multiplayer free, because most consoles, again, do charge for their online service. So this would be a very different direction for Microsoft if they actually did this as a company. So we'll have to wait and see how they're actually going to do this and things like that, because it is actually going to be interesting. Now, according to this tweet, there is a tweet that I am going to show you on screen right here. According to this tweet, actually, that I did find on the internet, it looks like they may just be making it flat out just free and not even actually combining it with Xbox Games Pass, which again, I think in my opinion is actually better, not because I'm cheap, because it'll show people, it'll give people a reason to buy a Microsoft Xbox over something like a PlayStation or even a Nintendo system, because you have to pay for the online, and for a lot of people, gaming is extremely expensive. So this is just one reason to actually go out and buy their console. But it says Xbox Live Gold is going away and playing online multiplayer will be free. They will not force you into Ultimate to play online. So apparently from this tweet, it does look like they're not even going to combine it with Xbox Live or Xbox Games Pass. They are just going to be making it its own service, which is actually pretty crazy. And if that is actually true, that might actually entice me as a person to actually go out and buy an Xbox Series X when this thing comes out. Now, the thing that I actually want to know about this, since it's not specifically saying what platform is it on, does that mean every Xbox ever made that does have Xbox Live, you won't have to pay to play the online multiplayer? Or is that just for the upcoming Xbox Series X? Because if it's just for the upcoming Xbox Series X, that would kind of be a weird situation, because it's like, well, we're going to give people free multiplayer with the Xbox Series X, but on the Xbox One, we know we already sold like 40 or 50 million units. We won't give everyone free online. You'll still have to pay for Xbox Live Gold, but I don't think that would be the scenario because that would be weird. It just wouldn't give off a good vibe for Microsoft, so I don't think they're actually going to do that in the long run. I think they would actually try to do something else because that actually doesn't make sense again. But this is some pretty big news for the Xbox brand itself and for Xbox or Microsoft really trying to get their console back on track, because you guys remember last generation, or this generation, excuse me. I don't know why I said last generation, technically this generation, since we're still on the Xbox One and the PS4. Going back to this generation, you guys remember with the at the beginning of the Xbox One's release, they were talking about how the Xbox One was going to be a console that was mostly dedicated to entertainment. They weren't really talking about for the gamers. They didn't really brand the Xbox as like a gaming console. They cared more about, I said, entertainment like TV. They also were anti-gamer, just because you may remember that in the release they're like, yeah, we're going to have DRM protection or whatever on our video games. You can't borrow your friends' used copies and things like that. And it was funny that Sony actually took that as a green light to make a video where they actually made fun of Microsoft for not allowing used games to be played on their system. Of course, all that turned out to not be true. But then, of course, years later, they made the Xbox One X, which is a more powerful Xbox One, of course, and that one was really geared towards the gamer. That kind of focused a little bit more about gaming. It was just purely gaming, even though the Xbox One was always branded for entertainment. It's was more about the gamer experience there. So I can see Microsoft with the Xbox Series X continuing on that trend, just forgetting about entertainment and not really trying to piss off the gamers, because who is the demographic for these consoles anyway? When you think of Xbox, you think of something that's made for specifically the gaming crowd. So why would you come on stage at like E3 2013 or whatever and say, yeah, we're not going to make this for gamers, or we'll make this box for gamers, but we won't really talk about gaming. We'll talk about entertainment this and entertainment that, how you can connect this to your cable TV subscription, and how you can do all these cable TV-esque things with that. And that's not what gamers wanted. So by making Xbox Live free, that would pretty much give people another reason to go out and buy a Series X when this thing actually launches. So it is very interesting, and I'm honestly very excited as a gamer if this is actually true, because with the combination of Xbox Games Pass and Xbox multiplayer being free, if this holds up to be true, is absolutely going to be amazing for everybody out there, and it is going to be a win-win scenario for gamers. So I hope this actually turns out to be true. And the last one on my list is actually about Microsoft again, because it looks like Microsoft is back at it with their company, and they claim Microsoft wants to operate with zero waste by 2030, and I think this is a pretty awesome move in the right direction. Of course, obviously, it's a good take on the environment, because as we speak, we're doing a lot of harm to the environment, especially with like electronic waste, one of the big key components with the environment, and how like global warming is being contributed. It's being contributed to a lot of e-waste and things like that. So it's always nice when companies out there really try to focus on the future and care for the environment and care for the planet, because we should care about the next generation of humans who do live on planet Earth, whether we're here on planet Earth or not here on planet Earth. It's still great for all the upcoming generations who should try to have a better tomorrow. And I'm actually pretty awesome that they say they want to get rid of waste. Again, they do say they want to get rid of zero waste by 2030, and they want to try to eliminate anything that's pretty much going to be bad for the environment, like maybe their packaging for anything that they produce, like all their laptops, all their game consoles, just anything that they have to package. They want to make better packaging. They want to try to emit no like toxins into the air or anything bad when they're producing all this stuff and doing everything. And I think this is a good thing, and I also think it's a good thing for their brand, because anytime a company wants to do something like this, it does show that they are a very good company, and that may actually, if you think about it, at the end of the day, it may mean some people out there may be looking at this as like, well, the company, at least I know when I'm buying their tech products, they care about the environment and they don't really want to throw around a lot of waste into the world. So it shows that they're a company that does care. It's not just a company that's out there to make money, because a lot of times these companies come out and they're like, yeah, all we care about is making money. We don't really care about anything else. We don't care about the consumer. We don't care about the environment. We don't care about anything. It's strictly for money purposes. So it is nice that at least Microsoft does care about something rather than themselves, and they want to try to make the world a better place by trying to not really consume or dispose of as many toxins as possible. And I think this is a really good thing. It looks like, according to this article, it does say people tossed out a record 53.6 million metric tons of e-waste globally in 2019. So you can see that it looks like there is no stopping people who are just dumping all their tech products and dumping all their stuff into the environment, whether it's landfills, whether it's bad packaging, whether it's just a whole bunch of different things into the environment. This is just not good news. You can see we are destroying the planet. It's the tech that's really destroying the planet. Not only is it the tech that's destroying the planet, it's really the people who are destroying the planet, who really don't care about the planet, don't care about eco-friendly packaging, don't care about like just things being thrown into the environment. And that's not good, because it is ultimately hurting our environment and hurting the place that we live. So we should try to actually work better to actually try to figure out a better way to actually not destroy the planet while we're making these tech products and things like this, because sooner or later we will see the rippling effects of this. It's only a matter of time. I know a lot of people out there think, like, for instance, global warming is just like a hoax or fake and things like that. It's not actually true, but time and time again, it's unfortunately already proven that global warming is actually destroying our planet, and it is hitting up the planet. And each and every year it looks like that the regular the regular temperature of the earth, or the average temperature of the earth, is heating up. And that's not great news, because of course that does mean it's going to be more harder for humans to exist. Of course, it does kill off a lot of species that would otherwise be on planet Earth if it wasn't for global warming. Another thing that it does hurt, of course, is the glaciers in the poles, and apparently that's not good news when we do that, because, like I said again, it really does kill off a lot of species on Earth that would otherwise be here. And also it does affect how the oceans do operate. Like, for instance, tropical storms get affected by global warming and by the glaciers being destroyed. It also means that the water rises over time, so you get higher levels. Sometimes it could affect like the waves. I know waves have to do with like the moon or the sun, I do believe, but overall we're doing a lot to contribute to the earth not being as safe as a place to live as it once been, just because it really does boil down to humans specifically. I'm sure there's animals that may contribute to the planet Earth, but for the most part it's humans doing all the damage to the earth. So it is nice again that Microsoft as a company is really focusing hard to try to make sure they don't have any e-waste by 2013. Of course, if you were expecting Microsoft to do that, to get rid of e-waste overnight, it's just not going to happen with any company, because of course it does take time to try to transition everything that they own and operate to be a little bit more safer. So again, it's going to take a little while for Microsoft to do it, but as long as they can do it by 2030, that's not too bad, taking in consideration that's only about 10 years from now. So if they can pretty much eliminate everything that they own that's causing the problems and things like that, then we'll be pretty good. And yeah, I think that's going to be it for this episode. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.